field, taking a knee in silent prayer, would assume that he's speaking on behalf of the school district, and that somehow is a violation of the Establishment Clause because public schools are government. Our argument was, well, obviously he's speaking on his own behalf. It's not the school district's speech, it's his speech. But the Ninth Circuit ruled against us. We went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did not take the case, but they did something very rare. They issued an explanation as to why. And it was signed by 4 justices, which is significant because when they meet to vote on what cases they're going to take, if 4 justices vote to take the case, then they take the case. So they issued this little explanation, and it was basically like a playbook for us as to how to bring Coach's case back to them. And that's what we're following right now. So we went back down to the trial court because they said there were some issues they didn't feel had been clarified enough that if they took it right now, they'd get bogged down in a very fact-specific ruling. You don't want the Supreme Court to do that. You want them to answer the big First Amendment question. So we went down, back to the district court, got that clarified, and we're now back at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. We'll be submitting our brief here in the next month or so. It's possible the Ninth Circuit might get it right this time, and if so, great for Coach Kennedy and for religious freedom. If not, then we will go back to the Supreme Court and hopefully remind them of that little note that they issued, and have them take it and fix it for the entire country. So churches, ministries, public schools, the military, you would be shocked at the number of times we have to contact the military to defend someone's right to live according to their faith. These are people who willingly signed up to fight and, if necessary, die for that right, and they're having it denied to them. Our most current military matter, the U.S. Navy just issued a new order, and we have multiple clients, some of whom who were just coming home, who were made to sign a document saying that they had read this order and that if they violated it, they could be court-martialed. The order prevents anyone in the Navy or attached to the Navy, so if you're an Air Force guy and you're attached to from attending indoor religious services. It specifically says you can have a party at your house and you're free to go protest if you want to go protest, but indoor religious activity is prohibited. So by this order, you could have a party at your house and have 100 people over, and every one of them could bring beer, but if one of them brings a Bible, you might get court-martialed. You think I'm making it up. I thought they were making it up when they...
So does it discriminate whether it be the house is on base or off base?
No.
Wow.
Not that I'm aware of. No, I'd have to go back and read the order again, but we just sent COVID. Somehow gathering together in churches is a danger. Right. Right.
It's not considered essential by some parties.
So we've contacted the Navy. Anytime you're dealing with government, especially in the military, you can request a religious accommodation if a regulation impedes upon your religious beliefs. This clearly does. One of our clients is a chaplain. Okay, it clearly impedes upon him. So we're now waiting for the Navy's response. We're going to try to get them to either rescind or revise that order, and we'll see what their response is. That's very new. That just happened in the last week or so. So it's going to develop over time. And then the last category would be just what we call like the public arena, and that's kind of the catch-all. That's a Bladensburg Cross case. We represent the Knights of Columbus in a little town in Delaware, who for I think 70-something years have put a creche out at Christmas time until last year when they were told they couldn't. So we're now talking with the city and reminding them of the most recent Supreme Court case on this issue, which we're a little familiar with because it was our case and we won. If a 40-foot Latin cross can be there for 100 years every day and not violate the Establishment Clause, something tells me a creche for a few days at Christmas time doesn't violate it either. That's sort of the public arena type case. That's the very short version of what we do. There's been 2 or 3 Supreme Court decisions come out this term that a lot of people have been interested in. I'll mention those briefly. If you got questions, I'll try to answer them, and then I'll just open it up for questions. The Bostock decision changed the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VII, specifically that deals with employment discrimination, and said that in 1964, when they passed this law, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, religion, sex, and certain other categories. That in 1964, when they wrote the word sex into this statute, they intended it to cover sexual orientation and transgenders. So the Supreme Court just updated a law from 1964 to expand the coverage. Now, regardless of whether you come down on the policy of protecting people from discrimination on that basis, the Supreme Court is not the body to do that.
Amen.
That's the legislature's job. I think it's a terrible opinion. That's me speaking on behalf of John Lathan Watts, not necessarily in official capacity of First Liberty Institute. It's going to create a lot more cases because now, even though this was specifically about Title VII, there will be people who will go through the entire federal code, and anywhere you see the word sex, they're going to say, well, that covers sexual orientation and transgender. So it's going to create a lot of issues. Think college campuses and co-ed dorms, women's sports, locker room facilities, who can come in and out of the bathrooms that your children are in. It's going to create a lot of work for folks like us. June medical was a challenge to a Louisiana law on abortion clinics requiring the doctor at the abortion clinic to have admitting privileges to a local hospital. That law was struck down as unconstitutional. It was almost identical to a statute in Texas that the court ruled was unconstitutional a couple of years ago. So they followed that precedent. Again, there are lots of different opinions on that decision and whether or not this court is looking for the right vehicle to address abortion in this country. I think there will be other cases that don't mimic exactly the case they've already ruled on, that will have other restrictions, that I would be surprised if the court didn't uphold those restrictions. But because this one was exactly almost to the letter like a case they had already said was unconstitutional, they were bound to kind of follow their own precedent. That's at least what Chief Justice Roberts said. And here's some good news, because I know those those are not fun decisions to hear about. Just this week, they in the Espinoza decision said that if states have a school choice program where your tax dollars can be used, like or a scholarship credit can be given to people so that they can take their kid to a private school if they choose. If a state has that program and that money is going in the form of scholarships to a private school, they cannot exclude a religious private school from participating. That's good news. It was based on a thing called a Blaine Amendment, which have been around for a long time, that were frankly passed in a wave of anti-Catholic legislation many years ago. So that's good. That is, government can't treat religion worse than it treats something else. You don't have to have these programs in your state, but if you do, you can't exclude religious schools from participating. So there's some good news. There's still 2 more decisions to come this term. One, the Little Sisters of the Poor. This is leftover litigation of the Obamacare birth control mandate. They've been in court for years on this, and this, I think, will be the last of those cases. From a policy perspective, if you find yourself suing the Little Sisters of the Poor,
Yeah.
you may want to rethink the policy. Just, again, the gospel according to Lathan Watts. And then they have one, I just blanked on the name, Guadalupe, I think. It's a case involving what's called the ministerial exemption. So in employment law, if you're a religious organization, a church, you get to hire and fire your minister based on what you decide, right? And you're not really held to some of those same provisions of, say, like the discrimination under Title VII that was mentioned in the other case. So this is about whether a teacher in a private Christian school is covered by that ministerial exemption, or does it have to be like the principal or the superintendent? And we'll have to wait and see. Those are the last 2 that we're waiting on. And it would be, yeah, there are several cases still left to be announced, the opinions to be announced. They're usually done by the end of June. so it's rare for them to go into July like they have now. So we're still waiting on those last 2 cases to come out, and then we'll we'll see how those opinions break down. But right about this time, Justice Thomas is usually in his Winnebago, leaving D.C. He takes a big RV trip across the country every year at the end of the term. Hangs out in Walmart parking lots and RV parks and all this. He says all the time, he's like, I'm not wanted in the D.C. social circuit, and I don't want to be there. So I go out and I meet with regular people. He likes driving his RV across country. So I suspect he's probably already left, but still a couple of decisions left to come out. So that's a very quick overview of the Supreme Court cases that we've been watching. I've been talking for a while, so I would be happy to answer questions if I can. And if I don't know, I will tell you I don't know. And if you keep pressing me, I will make something up.
Okay, how do you get involved in your cases? Typically, it sounds like you hear about it in the news.
Sometimes, yeah.
But people can individually approach you.
Yes, absolutely. The easiest way to get in contact with us, if you think you have an issue that you need our help, at the top of our website, firstliberty.org, there are 2 unmistakable buttons at the top. One that says get legal help, and one that says donate. All right? That's the 2 things that are most important on that website. The get legal help button, you click that and it pulls down a very simple form where you give us your contact information and a brief description of what's going on, and one of our legal assistants will get in contact with you and get more detail, and then we'll move on from there. So sometimes people contact us. Sometimes, as you said, we hear about something and we contact them and let them know, you don't have to put up with this, and actually it won't cost you anything.
Well, and I think that's wonderful that you're proactive. But the other question I have, it seems to me a lot of people roll over so they don't have to apply.
Yes.
For instance, the cross on the amendments.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you actively go after people that, or do they turn you away because they don't want you to apply?
We don't ever drag a client to court.
Well, no.
I mean, and we try to resolve things in any way that we can resolve it that's successful for our client. Sometimes it never sees the inside of a courtroom. In fact, a lot of times it doesn't. Just the fact that we get involved and we go sit table from the right person, and we can resolve things without going to court. Now, something like the Bladensburg Memorial, that was an agenda by the American Humanist Association. There was no way that was going to get resolved out of court, right? So we took it all the way and we won. And thankfully, created more religious freedom, really, than in our lifetime.
Well, you sure have a lot of memorials coming down now.
Certainly, yeah. It's one thing to protect something legally. It's quite another thing to stand in front of it and stop a mob from doing it themselves.
No, I know that.
One other thing, because Terry will get on me if I don't mention this. If you want to know more about our cases, if you want to stay updated on all of our work, we've got these little cards. You can give us contact info, and we'll put you on our email list. We send out a newsletter every week. We don't spam you to death, but it is an update on our cases and where they are in the process, and just other issues that are out there.
And you guys are on Facebook and Twitter also?
We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we're now on Parler.
Oh, yes, the Parler.
Yeah. So Parler is
It's the new Twitter because Twitter's become a police state.
a lot of people have fled Twitter for Parler.
Or anti-police state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Twitter's become a liberal ground for terror.
Yeah, so you can follow us on social and see a lot of stuff there as well. But I'm happy to answer other questions. Yes, sir.
I typically stay away from a lot of the media news. A lot of it's bad information like we're citing.
Mm-hmm.
But I did hear about the decisions equal rights, and I'm sad to hear that we take it to such extremes and don't keep
Right.
it. But having said that, and I'm not an employer, so this is a theoretical question.
Mm-hmm.
If I were an employer and I had someone that fit the descriptions of something where in the past I said, I don't want to hire them.
Mm-hmm.
Now legally I have to consider them. And I hired somebody like that. but my beliefs and my practice of my business is contrary to some of those things. What restrictions or rights do I have as an employer to protect those things?
Right. That's exactly what is going to be litigated
Litigation?
in cases after this Supreme Court decision, because the decision didn't address that. It just said this is the only question that's before us right now, and the majority opinion even said there are other considerations, like there are exemptions to Title VII for religious organizations. There's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. There's the ministerial exemption, and he said, but none of those questions are before us right now. They're going to be, and that's exactly the scenario you laid out is exactly what it will be.
This has been over 30 years since I've been here. I worked for a company that the head of the company was Jewish. And so he simply said, in your office, you don't have Christmas decorations. We have a holiday party, but we don't
Right.
celebrate Christmas.
Right.
There's no mention of it. There's nothing. And that was just kind of a, and in those days, that's what you did, or you didn't have a job.
Right. Yes, sir.
So I remember years ago, the seal of the city of Edmond that was on every one of the police cars had a cross in one of the quadrants of the seal. And then it got removed. And frankly, I can't tell you what our current seal looks like. Do they know?
It's the same, I think it's just blank right there.
It's just blank right there. So is that stuff that you guys would be interested in?
If they wanted to put it back,
Who's that? Just citizens of Edmond want to put it back?
I mean, if it came up, it would depend, sort of who we would represent. But we could also, at the very least, provide information to the city that says, I know you did this whenever they did it years ago. There is a new Supreme Court opinion that you should look into, that if you decided you wanted to do this as a symbol of, it's part of the history of this town.
Yeah.
It's not compelling anyone to worship anything. It's not taxing them to support a church. Therefore, it does not violate the Establishment Clause. So if the city decided to do that, I think they would be on pretty good legal ground. If they did it and then somebody tried to sue them to take it off again, they could contact us. We might be able to help in that way. But we saw a lot of things happen like that after that decision came out.
Hey, Mac, I just pulled up, that's actually been to the Supreme Court.
Oh, has
The
it?
city of Edmond, yeah. It says the 10th Circuit ruled in favor of the Establishment Clause.
That was probably Oklahoma though.
The decision was allowed to stand after the Supreme Court declined to take the case by 63 votes. I assume it's the big Supreme Court.
They didn't have you as lawyers.
You'll revisit them then.
Yeah, maybe.
What happened with the 10 Commandments at
At the state capitol.
Yeah,
somebody buy that?
Well, they put it at a think tank, private property last I heard, but with the new legislation that you're talking about, could we potentially bring it back?
we're actually defending a Ten Commandments monument in Arkansas right now that was put up at the state capitol grounds just a few years ago, and what we will see is, with the Supreme Court opinion in the case that we won, it was kind of an interesting opinion because you had a lot of concurrences and a lot of you had several justices who would go along with, as long as the monument is in keeping with the history and tradition, it's presumed constitutional no matter how old the monument is. Right. Like even a new monument, which this thing in Arkansas is. But not all of them went that far. Some of them said, well, these monuments that have been around for a really long time are obviously part of the history and tradition, and so no, you can't tear those down now. But I don't know if that would apply to some just brand new monument. So the Arkansas monument is fairly new, but one of the concurrences, I think it was Kavanaugh's concurrence, said it's not the age of the monument, it's the monument's keeping with timeless principles. And therefore, most Ten Commandments monuments are put up as a way of memorializing the moral foundation of law. So when they put them at state capitals, they typically are trying to remind legislators that there's a moral foundation of law. And this is one of the oldest written codes in the history of the world. It's not compelling anybody to worship anything. It's not taxing you to support a church. The monument in Arkansas was actually, the money was raised privately and placed there. So we defended the one at the Texas State Capitol grounds many years ago and defended it. Arkansas followed that process almost identically, so we're confident we'll win that one. But once something's been done and then trying to put it back, that's an interesting question. I don't know how that would play out.
What are you seeing that, I mean, because a lot of us, we're just trying to get on with our day like most people. What are things that we should be vigilant to look for that we may not, be looking for right now?
Yeah. One thing that the Trump administration has appointed now 200 and had confirmed 200 federal judges in just under 4 years, which I think breaks a record in that amount of time. For the most part, because when a nominee is announced, we research their record on the issue of religious liberty. That's the only issue we look at. There are plenty of other people can research the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. This is the only thing we do, so that's the only thing we look at. We're C3, we're not partisan. We say this is their record on this issue, and it's either good or bad. We don't tell senators how to vote. This is their issue. This is their record on this issue. And by and large, his nominees have been outstanding on religious liberty. So we've been encouraged because their average age is about 40, and these are lifetime appointments. So they'll be on the bench, if they stay in good health, 30, 40 years if they want. One of his appointees, who's now the federal district court judge, the district court level, in Amarillo, Texas, before he took that appointment, was deputy general counsel for First Liberty Institute. So we know he's going to be good on religious liberty, right? So that's one thing to keep an eye on is judicial appointments and confirmations, because they are appointed for life. Any president, that's their longest surviving legacy is the judges that they put on the court. It's not an exact science. A lot of people were very happy with Neil Gorsuch until that Bostic decision came out that he authored, right? A lot of people were happy with John Roberts. He joined that Bostic decision. He wrote the decision that upheld Obamacare. When you're up there for a long time, people change over time. It's an interesting phenomenon, but that's one thing to pay attention to. Federal judges being nominated and being confirmed. I personally think that a lot of issues are getting decided in the courts because elected officials are not doing their jobs. They would rather punt it to the court, to somebody who's not accountable to the voters anymore. Because, take the Bostic decision, right? Updating the Civil Rights Act to include sexual orientation and transgender. They had tried to do that in Congress several times and it never passed. Okay, which, one, if according to this Supreme Court decision they actually meant to do that in 1964, why have they been trying to amend it ever since? Of course they didn't mean to do that in 1964. Two, some elected officials were very nervous about voting on that issue, and were probably very relieved that the Supreme Court did what they did, because now they don't have to. They don't have to take a vote one way or another and then go face angry voters on either side of that issue. And I think a lot of the things that get resolved in courts, if people want to talk about,
and it's a lot harder to disassemble in the courts after that.
Absolutely. And the founders gave the judicial branch lifetime appointments and not being responsible to the changing whims of public opinion for a reason. Okay? That's why they're not supposed to be a policy-making branch.
There you go.
That's the legislative branch and the executive branch, right? But people in both of those other two branches, frankly, have abandoned a lot of their responsibility, and the court's role has expanded, which is why what we do is as important as it is. I wish it wasn't. I'd be happy if we could work ourselves out of a job. But I think with the way our culture has changed, law and politics are always downstream of culture. If you lose the culture, you will eventually lose in court, right? So that's why we also have a think tank. We kind of make the academic case for this. We have an undergrad fellowship program where we bring college kids to DC and teach them about constitutional law and religious liberty, because they're never going to hear it in universities. They just will not be taught it, right? I went to law school, did constitutional law for 2 semesters. I don't remember ever consulting the Constitution. It was case law. Here's this giant book of Supreme Court opinions that you're responsible for knowing. And I'm like, well, what does the Constitution say? But one of the great things my law professor taught us was a healthy disrespect for the Supreme Court. These are not 9 demigods who just sit up there and know more than you do. And him talking to law students, you come out of this class, you can read the Constitution, you can read the case law, you can do this just as good as they can. So that's my own little soapbox rant, but I'm getting the hook here. I'll hang around after and answer questions. And seek Terry if you want to get on our email list or you want more information about how to support us. Thank you all very much for having me.
Thank you, Lathan.
I'll do the elbow.
We appreciate you guys coming up, and we'd love to have you come every year and just kind of give us an update. Hopefully it'll be a little more air conditioned next time. So, anyway.
Glad to do
You'll
it.
be around just for a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys, thanks for the fellowship.